Another type of equation that we will need to know how to solve is known as a quadratic equation. Quadratic equations are any equation that have an x squared in them. So how we solve them is we just group like terms and then we solve by taking the square root of x. But let's try that. Step one, let's group like terms. So I'm just going to subtract 2x from both sides. Let's do that. So minus 2x squared and then minus 2x squared over here. And that will give us 4 minus 2x squared is 2x squared. Minus 2 is equal to 0 plus 6. And so now I'm going to add 2 to both sides to get the 2x squared by itself and group like terms. So 2x squared is equal to 8. So now all we need to do is get the x squared by itself. So I want to divide both sides of the equation by 2. I'm going to bring that up here. That'll give me x squared is equal to 4. And if I want to solve for the x, now all I have to do is take the square root of both sides, because the square root of anything squared is just that thing to the power of 1. So in other words, let's just take the square root of both sides. So square root of x squared is x. And then this is where we have to be careful, because the square root of 4, for the square root of 4, there are 2 square roots. We have positive 2, but there's also negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 is also equal to 4. So when we're solving these quadratic equations, we always have to remember that there is 2 solutions normally, and when we have a square root like this, it's just plus minus whatever the square root of that is. But anyway, this is our solution for this example. Whenever we are solving an equation that has a variable squared, that is known as a quadratic equation. And how we're going to solve this one is we're just going to group like terms, and then we're going to just solve for x by dividing by whatever factor of x is left over and then taking the square root of x. But first, let's do our first step and group like terms. So I'm just going to subtract 2x from both sides, or 2x squared, excuse me. So on this side, we'll have 10. We'll just be left with 10. And then 3x squared minus 2x squared is x squared. And then we're left with plus 1. So now I'm just going to subtract 1 from both sides. Let's see. So we're left with 9 is equal to x squared. So to solve for this now, all we need to do is take the square root of both sides. So I'm just going to take the square root of x squared, which will give me x, and the square root of 9. And so now we're left with plus or minus 3 is equal to, that goes on this side. Plus or minus 3 is equal to x. And that's our solution. Now, the reason it's plus or minus 3 is because negative 3 is also the square root of 9, because you can multiply negative 3 squared, and that would give you 9. And so whenever we take the square roots in these quadratic equations, we have to be careful, because we almost will always have 2 solutions. In this case, it was a plus 3 and a minus 3. But let's do a couple more examples to get more comfortable with this. In this example, we have a quadratic function that we can solve for x the same way that we did earlier. We just have some extra simplification to do beforehand. So our first step is to just get rid of the fractions here. So we could multiply both sides by 3 to get rid of this fraction, and then multiply both sides by 5 to get rid of that fraction, but I'm just going to combine both of those steps into one step, and I'm going to multiply both sides by 15, right? Because 3 times 5 is 15. So let me just show you this. Instead of going like this, I'm just going to multiply it by 5 also while we're at it to save me some room on the board. But 15 times x is 15x squared. And then if we do 15 times this divided by 3, that would just give us 5 times this stuff up here. So that would give us minus 5x squared. And then we would have, let's see, what's minus 5 times minus 10 is plus 50. If you need to break that into single steps, you can. I just did it all in one step. So this side is done, and then now we have this side. So 15 times 35, I'm going to need my calculator for that one, is 525. And then over here, our 5s are going to cancel, so we'll just be multiplying. This here by 3. So we have minus 3x squared, and then we have minus 50 times 3, which will give us minus 150. So let's just go ahead and simplify this by just doing the basic addition and subtraction. So we have 10x squared plus 50, and then we have, what's 525 minus 150? I think is 375, and then minus 3x squared. So now this looks more like the last example. From here, we can just group the like terms. So I'm going to add plus 3x to both sides to get rid of this here. 3x squared, excuse me. I keep saying x, but I mean x squared. So now we have 13x squared over here plus 50 is equal to just 375. And I'll bring this all over here. Now, let's see. Let's just write it over here first, and then we can go ahead and subtract 50 from both sides. So I'm going to subtract 50 to finish combining like terms. And here we're just left with 13x squared is equal to 375 minus 50 is 325. So now we're left with a factor of x squared, but we want to solve for x. So let's just divide both sides by 13 to just get the x squared by itself. Let's see if 325 can be divided by 13 cleanly. Perfect. 325 divided by 13 is just equal to 25. And so, if we take the square root of both sides, that will just give us x squared, or that will just give us x is equal to plus or minus 5, because the square root of 25 is 5, and it is also negative 5. So this will be our solution for this example. When we're solving equations that have x squared and x, all we need to do is set one side of the equation to 0 and then factor the other side. So let's go ahead and get rid of this 12 on this side subtract negative 12x, negative 12x. So that gives us 0 equals x squared. Let's go ahead and write this in the form we're familiar with. So I just wrote it in the form x squared plus bx plus c, because that's what we know how to factor. So how do you factor this? Well, let's just find factors of 27. So we have 27 and 1, and then we have 9 times 3, and that actually looks like it will add up to 12. And it looks like we'll use just a negative for both. So let's go ahead and factor that. How we do that is we just leave this other side equal to 0 still, and then we can factor. We have x negative 9 times x negative 3. So your solutions now for this is we need to find whatever value of x will make this side equal 0. So what would make it 0 is 9, right? Because if x was equal to 9, then this would be 0, and it doesn't matter what this is, because 0 times anything is equal to 0. So 9 is a solution, and then also 3 is a solution, because same thing, this would equal 0, and then 0 times anything is 0. So our x is equal to 9 and 3. That's our solution for x. Once again, we just set one side equal to 0, and I got the trinomial into this format, x squared plus bx plus c, which is what we know how to factor from earlier lessons. And then we factored it, and once we did that, the answers are whatever make this right side equal to 0, and that was 9 and 3. So let's do some more examples. This equation we can solve the same way. We just want to get everything on one side of the equal sign, and then we can get it in this form, x squared plus bx plus c, factor it, and that will give us our solutions for a. So the best way to probably do it is to get the a squared so that it's positive, because otherwise the factoring will be weird. So let's just move this a squared on the other side of the equal sign so it's positive. Let's add a squared here and add a squared here. So we have 2a equal to 4a minus 3 plus a squared. Now let's get rid of this 2a over here. So subtract 2a from both sides, and that gives us 0 equal to, what's 4a minus 2a? That gives us 2a minus 3 plus a squared. So I'll rewrite this so that it looks like our x squared plus bx plus c, just so it's easier to factor. 0 equals a squared plus 2a minus 3. So now all we need to do is find factors of 3, right? That will add up to 2. So we have 3 and 1. And if we use a negative 1, that will give us positive 2. And when we multiply them, it'll give us negative 3. So we know those are our factors. So let's write this as 0 equals a plus 3 times a minus 1. So what will make this side of the equation equal to 0? Negative 3 and 1, right? So our a is equal to negative 3 and 1. That's our solution. Once again, we got these by making whatever makes this side of the equation 0, which would make the equal true. Those are our solutions. So -3 would make this 0, and then 0 times anything is still 0, so it doesn't matter what's over here. And then also 1 on this side would make this 0, and 0 times anything is 0. So those are both our solutions. In this example, we can solve this equation with the same method. So let's just multiply everything out. 55 times x squared gives us 55x squared minus 55 equal to 6 times 9 is 54x squared, and then 6 times -x gives us -6x. So what will give us a positive x are, if we bring this 54 over to this side, so let's subtract the 54x squared from both sides. So 55x squared minus 54x squared gives us x squared minus 55, and then that gives us minus 6x. So let's bring this 6x over here and write it in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So 6x, and that gives us, if we do 6x on this side, we can write it as x squared plus 6x minus 55 equals 0. And now we can just factor this by finding factors of 55, and that is 55 and 1, and then 11 times 5. And it looks like if we subtract 5 from 11, that will give us positive 6. And if we multiply those, it'll give us a negative 55. So let's write this in factored form. Up here, we can write x plus 11 times x minus 5 is equal to 0. So negative 11 will make this side 0, negative 11 and positive 5. So those are our solutions for x in this example, and this is our solution. So this example, we're going to want to do the same thing, get it in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So first of all, let's just get everything on the same side of the equation. So let's subtract 4a from this side, and let's actually subtract 4a minus 1 from both sides while we're at it. 4a minus 1. So that'll give us a 0 on this side and a 5a squared minus 4a minus 1 all equal to 0, right? So now it is kind of in this form, but we have a 5 for our a squared. We have a 5a squared. So all we really need to do at this point is divide both sides of the equation by 5 to get a squared, just as a normal a squared times 1. So we can do that. We can divide this by 5, and 0 divided by 5 is 0. So if we do that here, we can break this into fractions. What's 5 divided by 5? It gives us a squared. And then we have minus 4/5 a, and then minus 1/5 equals 0. And this is still in this form, so we can just go ahead and factor. Let's find factors of 1 over 5. That will get us 4 over 5. So if we have 1 over 5 and 1, if we do that, that will give us, we could do 1 minus 1 over 5, and that would give us 4/5. So if we did a negative 1 and a positive 1 over 5, that would give us negative 4 over 5. And if we multiplied those, it would give us negative 1 over 5. So we can write this as a plus 1 over 5 and a minus 1. So what would make this equation equal to 0? Negative 1 over 5 and positive 1. So those are our solutions for A, and that is how we would solve for A in this example.
Hey guys, if this video has been helpful to you, click the link in the description to get access to the complete Easy STEM Algebra 1 system, which includes a textbook, homework, and all of the course videos in order.